around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. There's a lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Wyatt! Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And wow, do we have a cracker on for you tonight. Absolutely fabulous. But before we get into our guests, there are a bit of admin that I have to talk about. Firstly, to all the dads, happy Father's Day. And congratulations. I'm sure you had a wonderful day with your family. Now, on a far more serious note, General Isaac FIRNZAJJ has a triple heart bypass to take place tomorrow morning. Please ask for your prayers. I have sent a message from you and I. So, thanks, Marlena. Sorry, I'm reading straight off her script. Now, tonight, we have a painting that's been donated by Lynn Ward, and the funds are going to Boere Droogtehulp, South Africa. After having donated various paintings, and let me just show you the painting before I go any further. There we go. After having donated various paintings, she is officially part of our Boere Droogtehulp South Africa and Loving Life YouTube family. We are truly honored to have such an esteemed artist on board and greatly appreciate her generosity. In her own words, "Painting is my life. I thank you so much for your interest in my work. I'll donate a painting where I can, and you can run with it. I see you have a passion for art and for this drought crisis." Now, I've put below this video in the description the link to Boere Droogtehulp's bank account and also the PayPal, so the winning bidder can just pay straight from there. Now, how this works with the auction, for those of you who are new to this, all you've got to do is to put in a painting in the side chat, and then next to it the amount of rands that you're willing to pay, and obviously it's got to be higher than the last bid. What is the description of the painting? Well, the title is Dairy Farm. The medium is oil on canvas. The size is 30 centimeters by 42 centimeters, and the artist, of course, is Lynn Ward. And the starting bid is 850 rand, and of course the money goes to Boere Droogtehulp, which is a charity in South Africa doing wonderful work. Okay, now let me get to our guest tonight, who is, as you know, Colonel Retired Chris Wyatt. And let me tell you a bit about Chris. Let me just get that information up for you. Go. Okay. Colonel Retired Chris Wyatt is the principal and CEO of the Indaba Africa Group. He is a retired U.S. Army military intelligence officer and foreign area for sub-Saharan Africa, and past director of African Studies at the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. He was previously the senior military advisor to the U.S. mission to the African Union, or USAU. Colonel Retired Wyatt has extensive experience across Europe with 3 tours in Germany, a tour in Italy, the Balkans, the Levant, Southwest Asia, and further service in Africa with assignments in Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. So he's a bit of a fundi when it comes to African affairs, so it's going to be really interesting to pick his mind tonight. His tours in Africa include duty as a senior defense representative, security assistance officer, and attaché assignments. Colonel Retired Wyatt is a published author, has extensive experience in defense and security strategic, tactical, and operational intelligence, as well as signals and counterintelligence, security sector reform, peacekeeping, international development, the health sector, i.e. HIV, AIDS, and Ebola, defense acquisition, diplomacy, program management, and he speaks 6 languages to varying degrees of proficiency. So, a bit of a fundi, you could say, guys, a bit of a fundi. I'm really excited having Chris on, and just for the record, I'm going to be a guest on Chris's channel in less than a week's time, this coming Friday. So I've got Chris's YouTube channel linked down below this video in the description, so please feel free to subscribe there and watch out for our chat on Friday night. Okay, I'm going to get Chris on. I've burbled on enough. Here we go. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent, mate. Excellent. How are you going?
How about it?
Bariako. Right. Now, Chris, you've had a really interesting life. Could you share with us some of the highlights before we get into topical affairs in South Africa and the chaos unfolding around the world?
I'm sorry, I missed it again. I was getting an echo on my end. What was that, Scott?
Okay. You've had a really interesting life. Could you share some of the highlights with us of your life?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. I was a dairy farmer as a kid. Not a lot of fun, but learned how to respect hard work and the value of labor. After that, I had a great experience at university for 1 year where I didn't focus on the studies and left after a year. I served during the Cold War in Europe. That was a great pleasure and distinct privilege to do that, to serve during the Cold War. And I've also, in my role in military, I've served in conflict a couple times in the first Gulf War. I've also done counterterrorism around the world. But some of the big projects I've been involved with is that I led the security sector reform program in Liberia, in which we rebuilt the armed forces of Liberia after its 13-year civil war. And they've performed admirably since then, not owing to me. They've done it on their own. But done that, also played a key role in convincing the U.S. Africa Command to help Botswana redesign its military intelligence infrastructure because it was spending too much time paying attention to private citizens and not to military intelligence, and convinced Botswana it was in their interest to do that. So we designed and implemented a brand new intelligence process for the entire military there. I wrote President's daily briefs for the President of the United States when I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's kind of a cool thing. I actually wrote one report that resulted in at least 640,000 people in Southern Africa not starving to death. But yeah, so I've done some pretty cool things. Been associated with some really amazing people from around the world, whether they're Africans or Americans or other friends, partners, and allies. It's been a pretty interesting ride so far. For those who know, I'm a huge rugby fan. You probably noticed I'm wearing the 2019 Springboks jersey here. And just behind me on my chair is a scarf. Where's it at? That's there we go. I got a scarf over here. That's a Springbok scarf. Because I know it's in the Southern Hemisphere, you guys are freezing because it's wintertime, but it's nice here in the Northern Hemisphere. Anyway, so yeah, I'm a huge rugby fan. I've been to every Rugby World Cup since 2011. 2011 in New Zealand, and then 2014 Paris for the women, 2015 England for the men, 2017 Ireland for the women, 2018 San Francisco for the Sevens World Cup, 2019 Japan. So I've hit every World Cup since 2011. Though I don't really care much for France. I don't care much for France, so I'm not so sure I'll be doing 2023.
Right. Now, just addressing the side chat, guys, please feel free to post your questions to Chris in the side chat, and later on in the show I'll ask some moderators to cut and paste those back into the side chat, and I'll present those to Chris. Now, Chris, what is the Indaba Africa group?
That's a good question. So most of my career, of course, being an intelligence officer, I can't exactly have a big social media presence. You don't advertise, hey, I work intelligence. By the way, here's what I'm saying on Instagram. No, so my social media presence has been relatively nondescript and quiet for most of my career. However, my last assignment was as the Director of African Studies at the U.S. Army War College, which is an academic position, and it gave me academic freedom. So as a consequence of having academic freedom, I was able to do some more things. So I started posting and putting analysis on articles and news reports and writing my own articles on LinkedIn because it's a professional website. And I was building out my network for my post-military service for what I plan on doing. So my plan all along was to take advantage of the 36 years of military service, travel all over the world, being involved in some pretty amazing events and places, and turn that into a strategic consultancy. And the idea came about because I'm frequently asked to speak at conferences and seminars. I'm also asked to do trainings for people, things like that. So I wanted to create something that some of them I do out of the goodness of my heart. Just, I pay the way. Like last year in April, I went to Chicago, all at my own expense. I had to take leave from military service, my own holiday, eat up to go to Chicago because it was not in the interest of the Army, but it was something I did for the Liberian Studies Association. So I went there to talk about the rebuilt Armed Forces Liberia. So I pay for the flight, I pay for the hotels and transportation, rental car, all of that stuff, which is not a big deal. But the point is that if I have a business, rather than simply coming out of my pocket, I could write that off against any compensation I get in the business. So, it's not actually income. So if I got paid $1,000, $2,000, most of that would be eaten up by the expenses. And so I really wanted to create this strategic consultancy based on that. So Indaba Africa was supposed to be my strategic consultancy. I started it in January, February, and had about $10,000 worth of consultancy gigs lined up in April and the first week of May. And then COVID-19, the greatest hoax of the 21st century, hit, and it all fell off the table. So I took what I was always going to do with my YouTube channel and use it as an adjunct of the consultancy, just to show speeches and presentations and things like that.
Right.
And started turning it into something to discuss events in Africa and geopolitical issues around the world. So it's a strategic consultancy. It's not exactly, it's not like Ernst & Young. There aren't 10,000 people working for me. There are a few people helping me out, though.
Right. Now, yesterday I watched one of your latest videos, which was attacking one of the reporters in the South African media, and it was the city press, Mondili Makanya, who was attacking AfriForum and the Institute of Race Relations, which is through Naspers. Now, City Press is owned by Naspers. Now, my understanding is that Naspers is actually owned or controlled by the Rothschilds. And it's interesting because Daily Maverick and Mail and Guardian get a huge amount of funding from the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros, and the South African Broadcasting Corporation by the ANC government. Now, in your mind, is there any doubt that the South African mainstream media, apart from, I think, papers like Marula Media Online, which is in Afrikaans, are presenting fake news based on their own agenda?
Well, some of what you told me, there's news to me. I didn't know that the Open Society Foundation funded the Daily Maverick and the Mail and Guardian. But what I can say is that from my perspective, from the outside looking in, I've been reading the Mail and Guardian for a long time. And I would say that 10 or 15 years ago, you could find decent news reporting in there. I'm not saying it was a great newspaper, but you could find decent reporting. But these days, the Mail and Guardian has gone the way of SABC and almost all the mainstream media in South Africa, in that they selectively report on things. So, for instance, when you talk about fake news, Scott, I don't know if it's really fake news, but the fact that you avoid reporting news. So how many black South Africans have been killed by the security services? We don't have an accurate figure because the media is covering it up. They're not reporting on it. Yes, they report on Collins Kosa, but that was early on, and so many witnesses saw it. It went so viral on social media, they didn't really have a choice but to report on it. So what they will do is they'll report any little instance that happens to a white South African to make it look as if the white South African community is pleading, that they're being attacked all the time, when in fact all South Africans are being abused by the security services under this lockdown. And if I could, Scott, very quickly, you said that I attacked in my video. I would disagree with that. I would say that I called out Makanya for his BS.
Maybe it's an Australian term.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not attacking a personal level, but I
Yeah.
mean, I think the conscious clerical responded back to me because I called in the video. He talks about the World Must Know campaign is lame, and I said, well, your op-ed is lame, and so. But anyway, but no, I wasn't attacking him. I was calling him out because he is intentionally distorting an argument. Look, I'm not a member of AfriForum, and I've not financially supported them, and I have almost nothing in the way of connection to them. But I have observed them for years, and I've observed how they're portrayed in the South African media and by South African politicians abroad. And I watched the movies they make, I watched the videos they've done, I read what they put on their site, and AfriForum to me is what they claim to be, a civil rights group focused on minorities. They've helped the Basotho people. Last time I checked, they weren't white. So I'm a little confused as to why this guy decides to attack them and slander them with an op-ed, and the Institute for Race Relations, for that matter.
Yeah, well, they're both really good organizations which are basically bringing a lot of the untried cases into court because of the the corruption within the judicial system in South Africa. Now, you just touched on Black Lives Matter when you were talking earlier. Give us an update on what is happening in America. We're seeing so much footage now of these protests, which are getting really ugly. What is the situation on the ground in America right now?
Well, first, it's important to note, and let me give you some perspective here. When I came back to the States a few years ago from living in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, working at the African Union, before I came back, of course, what I had access to was what you got international media from satellite and from DSTV and things like that. So you see CNN, you see Sky, you see BBC, excuse me, and a few others. And you would have forgiven me if, when I came back to the States a few years ago, if I thought that America was in the midst of a race war, that black and white people were killing each other in the streets, because that's how the media portrayed events back in 2015 with Freddie Gray, Ferguson, Trayvon Martin. But it's utter nonsense. It's utter cock. I came back, and these were a few isolated incidents in a few cities. Now, that's very different than what's happening today. What's happening today is groups like Antifa, which is ironically the anti-fascist movement, because these people are dyed-in-the-wool, brown shirt, fascist Nazis. That's what they are. Right. They are true fascists. They claim to be anti-fascist, and they proclaim it loudly, but they're actually now been designated a domestic terrorist group, which should have happened 8 years ago under Barack Obama, but his cowardice prevented that from happening. I'm hoping and look to see the Black Lives Matter also be declared a domestic terrorist organization, because in fact that's what they are. Now, that's an important point to make, because I need to distinguish between people who protest lawfully and legitimately under freedom of assembly, and those who terrorize innocent people in cities, target white people for abuse, attack cars, beat people in the streets, beat toddlers up. None of this is embellishment. All of these things have been happening in inner cities and metropolitan areas in the United States. What you're talking about, Scott, is what appears to be a ramp up, because that's what the media is covering. So, for instance, with Seattle, we have an armed insurrection, which has taken over the center of Seattle. The governor, Jay Inslee of Washington State, should resign. He's failed to perform his duty to protect the public as the governor. And the mayor of that city should also resign, because she has pulled the police back and allowed chaos to reign in there. Now, we had someone shot and murdered last night in that self-declared autonomous zone.
Yeah.
Scott, they no longer call it an autonomous zone. It's now Chaz, because they're afraid they're going to be charged with insurrection, which is what they've committed and what they should be charged with. Anyway, so that's happening in several cities, but most of this country is calm. I went to the supermarket a couple days ago. Black folks stand next to me in line. We're having a conversation. I live in a town that's 97% white, and he didn't feel scared of anything, because people get along just fine here. This is largely an urban phenomena that has been not blown out of context, but certainly been reported in a one-sided fashion.
Right. Well, what I always say when I cover these riots, which I do in live streams, is that they represent a tiny, tiny percentage of the American population. But the way they're presented by the media in America, like CNN, is that they represent what most Americans think. And I think when you look at the actual proportion of Americans that they represent, it is so, it is such fake news.
Well, I agree with you, Scott. And what's really disturbing about this is that most of these people running their mouths and running around are white people. The ones terrorizing people, destroying, they're white, they're not black. And most of them are privileged white people who've never struggled. Look, I grew up for a period of my youth without electricity. And I grew up without plumbing. So we used an outhouse, or as you guys say, an outdoor privy, and fetched water from a cistern. Now, a lot of Africans have that experience, especially in l'Afrique Noire. Lots of Africans have that experience. But try doing that when you have to break through 3 inches of ice in the morning to get 5:30 in the morning to get the water because the cistern is frozen. carry it down the hill in a 60-pound bucket, and it's sloshing all over your jeans in the middle of the wintertime. I'm not trying to say how hard my life is. My point is that you don't see me out there doing this sort of thing because I've actually lived a life and actually have earned my stripes in life. And you have people who've had a very privileged life who run around and say the most nonsensical things. I saw that clip of that woman in the UK that was on a couple of days ago where she's talking about tearing down the statue of Winston Churchill. Well, I haven't had a chance to speak to him yet. Well, of course you haven't. He's been dead for 60 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
Jesus.
And she also said she didn't know if he's racist.
Dear God.
Go figure. Now, a moment ago you just touched on Antifa and it being a terrorist organization. I think it was Trump who said that about a week ago. Now, that's funded by George Soros. Why is Why is he not being brought before the courts and being put behind bars?
Well, Scott, I could ask the same question why Hillary Clinton and Andrew McCabe are not behind bars, and our former FBI director who've committed criminal acts are not behind bars, violating the most sacred of the amendments of our Constitution. Or for that matter, why is Jacob Zuma still free? We could run through the list of Sheikh Shabir. I thought he was sick and he went out and was golfing. No, the elites protect themselves no matter who's in charge, and we rarely see. The only reason Epstein went down is because they couldn't cover it up anymore. That's the bottom line. Right.
Okay, well, just on that same theme, do you think that this Black Lives Matter protest, or the it's almost like a civil war developing in parts of America, is that an effort to try and get Trump displaced with the 2020 elections?
Absolutely. Virtually everything you've seen in the last 3 years has been an effort to get rid of Trump. And it's such a sad tragedy because it has diverted attention away from domestic policy and away from foreign policy. The irony is that, listen, I was not a fan of Donald Trump, but let me just share this with you here, just so people know where I sit now. Put this on my head. But I was not a fan of Donald Trump. I have issues with him that goes back to the 1980s when he helped the United States Football League collapse, and I was a huge football fan for that back in 1983. But anyway, I also think he's a bit pompous, and he's got all kinds of social graces that are lacking for such a rich guy. But my point is that in 2016 I voted for. Oh, I like your hat, Scott. I see it. Yeah, okay, now I see it. Yeah, so that's a good one. But so I voted for Trump in 2016, but it was in large measure because I couldn't vote for a person who I saw as a felon, and that's Hillary Clinton. I was a counterintelligence officer, and I know what the Espionage Act says, and I know that what she did was a felony, and it doesn't matter if she knew she did it or not, it's still a felony, possessing classified information on private servers. So anyway, but the point is that, so I wasn't a huge fan of Trump. I think his social graces are lacking. But then Obama was such a reprobate when it came to things that I made some allowances for Trump and his behavior. But Trump's policies have been largely beneficial for the United States and for the world. But everything they say about him is a lie. He's going to start a nuclear war with North Korea. No, he didn't start a nuclear war. In fact, North Korea stopped launching intercontinental ballistic missiles over the airspace of Japan, an act of war which they had done half a dozen times until Trump called him Rocket Man and Little Kim, not to be confused with the rapper. Anyway, so Trump, I was talking to someone yesterday, and the point was, well, but Donald Trump canceled NAFTA. No, he didn't. That's what the press tells people around the world. That's a lie. NAFTA is still in force because the USMCA has not been ratified by Canada yet, to my knowledge, unless it just happened. So what happened is that Trump wanted to renegotiate NAFTA, and he played the business guy. Okay, if you don't do it, we're just going to pull out of it. He has no authority to pull out of it. In the same vein that Barack Obama signing a piece of paper in Paris has no force of law. Presidents can't sign treaties until they're ratified by the Senate. So the world losing their mind because Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord. We weren't in the Paris Accord. That was a myth. That's utter nonsense. The problem is that people don't understand our system of government. But what's really shocking about that is that people in America don't understand our system of government. It's just not people around the world, but it's also Americans, and it's quite sad. So anyway, I got off the track there a little bit, Scott. Sorry, I got distracted by the hats. Did I answer your question?
Well, you mentioned just now that there's this sort of upper class elite which never seem to appear in court. Now, the same thing is happening in South Africa. When you look at the level of corruption that's taken place, and we've now got the situation, which I'm sure you're aware of, with the VBS Bank, where 8 of the top echelons of the VBFs have now been charged with corruption and money laundering and other stuff. Do you think that this will come down the line to hit Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu, who clearly had their hands in the till?
I would be astounded if either of them are ever convicted of a crime. Maybe charged, but ever convicted, I would be astounded. If they are convicted, charged and convicted, then it'd be a fine. That's all that's going to happen. Julius Malema is a convenient putz, a convenient boob, a convenient foil for the ANC. Now, his economic freedom fighters are not convenient because it's been siphoning away their votes. But Julius Malema is a twit that is very much convenient for the ANC, so he can take some of the flack. But I think that he's become more of a nuisance of late because now the ANC doesn't mind saying the ridiculous and racial things that they've allowed him to get away with for a long time. Now they're saying it themselves. And in fact, your president, not your president, but South Africa's president himself is saying it. I mean, famously, just 2 weeks ago, so white people by nature are racist. It's in their nature. And that's what causes spousal abuse. Are you Zollin, buddy? Are you smoking crack? Seriously? Anyway, just insane. I don't think we'll ever see either one of those guys in chains, which is where they belong. Right.
Well, I always talk about it being the L factor, which is the logic factor, which seems to be completely missing in action when it comes to the ANC and other people in their cadres. Now, let's move on a bit to what's happening with this COVID-19. I saw a report, which is, let me just see if I can dig it up, which is from the UK health sector, and they're basically saying that this coronavirus is a complete scam. They're saying that it's not deadly, as has been declared by the mainstream media, and this is a very authoritative organization within the UK, and they called it out. And that was on the 17th of June they called it out. What are your thoughts about coronavirus? Is it that deadly? What do you think about it?
Okay, so let me preface it by saying this. From the outset, this is a dangerous virus, and it is highly infectious. That's true. But so is tuberculosis. We don't shut the world down for tuberculosis. Right. So let's put things in perspective. And I am going to end this by saying it's the greatest political hoax of the 21st century thus far. But let me build to that very quickly. So, well, hopefully quickly. But anyway, so from the outset of this, when we saw it happening in China, the Chinese weren't releasing any information. The World Health Organization under Dr. Tedros was in China sucking up to them and repeating everything the Chinese were telling them to say, as if they were their puppet masters. Right. So, for instance, the problem with all of this is that governments around the world have reacted in an hysterical fashion because they listen to science. They listen to scientists who, imagine this, got it wrong repeatedly. It is the height of hypocrisy to hear the left always talk about conservatives. Now, I'm a conservative politically, but talk about conservatives as if they deny science. But when conservatives point out that life begins at conception, we believe in science. That's science. When conservatives point out that there's been climate change throughout the entire history of the Earth itself because of changing conditions, we're called science deniers. But these people are absolutely not paying attention to science. They're hysterical to it. So you can't have a blind faith to science. If we did, Pluto would still be a planet, and we wouldn't know 90% of what we know about astronomy, which we've learned in the last 40 years, and much of that in the last 15 years. Science changes. You propose a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you come to a conclusion, and you believe that's the evidence. But maybe your premise was wrong, and later you're disproven. So anyway, the point is that COVID-19. All right, so from the outset, they told us that it was deadly. 3.2 to 3.4% fatality rate, which is deadly, by the way, Scott. That's a high rate. I mean, It's not like Ebola, 40 to 90%, depending on the variant of Ebola. But still, 3.2 is a high rate, especially when tens of millions of people get infected with the virus, which happens like with influenza each year. So 3.2 to 3.4. But of course, that's nonsense. It's utter cock. It was a lie. They had bad data because they got it from the Chinese, and the whole world ran off and made political decisions, including Donald Trump, based on that. I'm not criticizing Trump for his decision. I'm just saying he made a decision on January 31st to shut down air travel from China based on that information from scientists, not based on a crystal ball, not based on black magic, which was these idiots claim he does. Anyway, so they were wrong about that. The fatality rate is 0.1 to 0.2, maybe 2.5, depending on the country and the conditions you're in. So it's not that far off from what influenza is. That's the first thing. They told us you can't get it from your pets. You can't give it to your pets. Then 2 months later, they're like, oh, keep your pets away from each other because your pets will get it. anyway, I can run through a whole list of things, Scott, about 25 different things we've been told. Don't wear a mask, then you get arrested for wearing a mask. Masks don't work, then you get arrested for not wearing a mask. It's all over the place. The bottom line is this, is that those in governance around the world should be ashamed of themselves and stop patting themselves on the back for having done a great job, because they've destroyed the world's economy. There is a reordering taking place now in which more power is being consolidated in the hands of oligarchies and monopolies and monopolistic practices. South Africa, companies not EdCon, because they were already in life support, and now they've been pushed into receivership essentially, but other large companies in South Africa that are in the retail sector are giddy. They're perfectly happy. They don't mind seeing small and medium-sized enterprises and informal traders go out of business, because it's more business for them. It concentrates more business in their hand because they have the capital to survive this. And that's happening all over the world. Amazon has profited immensely from COVID-19, as has Microsoft, Google, YouTube, Twitter. All these folks have profited. So the people who are suffering are the small, medium enterprises and workers around the world. And the biggest casualty of this hoax is liberty.
I totally agree with you. Now, it's funny when you talk about liberty, because I watch the side chat, and you know how it sometimes comes up with a show hide button where something's said that is unpleasant, or if someone uses a naughty word. The only word that this person put into her comment was Republican, and that came up with the show hide option, just because someone put Republican in there. That's YouTube for you. Anyway,
yeah, it is.
Let's
no, I was accused of censoring on my channel recently, and I'm like, no,
I don't
censor anything. I didn't censor anything.
Yeah,
I didn't censor anything. That was YouTube. In fact, I had a person who I had a overzealous moderator who's here tonight. I won't say who it was doing a good job, but blocked a comment, and I was curious who it came from in one of my live streams. I went back and looked at it, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this. So I brought the person back in and said, hey, don't leave the channel. I'll get to your question. Your chat was deleted by mistake, and no harm, no foul. If you're afraid of ideas, now if somebody's abusive and if they're threatening or something like that, then they're going to be blocked. But if you just want to have a discourse, you want to call people names, as long as they're not nasty names, I don't have a problem with that.
Right, totally agree. Now, getting back to COVID-19, and you touched on the impact it's had on the world when it comes to this lockdown and the economy. Do you think that when you look at how things unfolded, where it started in China during the Chinese New Year, and they did not restrict the travel of their citizens to other countries, was that a deliberate act, do you think, so that COVID-19 would impact, as it has, the world?
All right, Scott. There's lots of conspiracy theories out there about this right now, and what we lack is real information. This is based on what information I have, what research I've been able to get, and having not been in Wuhan on the ground. This is what I suspect happened. I believe that this was probably a pathogen that they were testing and reviewing in their level 4 biohazard lab in Wuhan, as people have claimed is likely the case. And someone in the lab, if you ever watch the Outbreak movie or something like that, where Kevin Spacey cuts his glove and gets infected and doesn't tell anybody, and he gets the Ebola. Similar situation. Somebody maybe cut a glove, got exposed, might not even known about it while in level 4, and then went out and got sick and gave it to their family, and it spread from there. Then this whole distortion and misleading story about it was in a wet market, that's where it came from, was probably propaganda to distract from what was going on. In the meantime, people started showing up sick in early December in hospitals in Wuhan, and the doctors are seeing strange symptoms and trying to figure this thing out, and they try to tell the communist authorities, and they're ignored, which is the norm in China.
Yeah.
So these physicians are not getting anywhere telling anybody, and what happens is that in the meantime, because there's no quarantine, there's no lockdown, there's no contact tracing, because they don't even know it's a new virus, it's starting to spread throughout Wuhan. It wasn't until over a month later, almost a month later, that the Chinese finally cordoned off Wuhan, but over 5 million people from the city had already departed the city, as well as people visiting for business and family and such, and spread all over China. And that's why when we see China's stats for 82,000 people infected with Wuhan, it's the biggest myth. I don't know. It's just absolutely ludicrous, because it's clearly in Shanghai and Beijing, Shenzhou, it's all over the country, but you're seeing no cases reported. So what happened is that China, of course, has a lot of business. People took it from Wuhan to the coast, which is where most of the population lives. They flew out, whether they were Europeans or North Americans or Africans, and they flew back. And there's a very good reason why the first places you saw it outside of China were on cruise ships, because cruise ships that come and make a port of call in Hong Kong saw this, or came into Hong Kong, People got infected, got back on the boat, and suddenly on the cruise ships. So you remember that a bunch of cruise ships that were going to Japan were isolated.
It's like
so
a
that's why
petri
that
dish.
happened. Exactly. And then people flew from Hong Kong and other Chinese cities around the world, whether it was to Japan or to North America or to Europe. Most people going to Africa either go through Addis. Fortunately, not a lot got through that way, but most, I think, the cases in Africa probably came from Europe after people took it there. And there's a reason why Italy was a big epicenter early on, because Italy is inundated with ethnic Chinese. They have taken over all the textile factories, which were Italian when I lived in Italy 20 years ago.
Wow.
They're now almost all Chinese. They've either bought them or bought parts of them and shipped in their own labor. And so those Chinese who are on holiday or visiting family or doing business from China back and forth to Italy, they brought it to Europe. From Europe, you're just 2 hours away from Switzerland and Austria and 3 hours from Germany by car, and it spread that way. Trump's big mistake was, if he made a mistake, was when he shut down travel from China. He should have shut down all international travel that day. That's draconian, but that's the only way it's going to stop. New Zealand has no cases of COVID-19. That's because they shut their borders down. They repatriated New Zealanders, but they isolated them, make sure they didn't have the virus, and now they don't have any cases of it. Unless a bird can fly over and drop it on somebody's head, it's not going to get in New Zealand right now. But that's almost an impossibility for the United States to shut down that level of traffic. We still have illegal people getting across our border in the south and also from Canada who can bring it in. So the Chinese, I don't think, did this intentionally. I think this is incompetence and an unwillingness to address this issue early on. We hear lots of times where if Trump had only acted a week earlier, this is hilarious because these are the people who called him a xenophobe and a racist when he implemented travel bans. And then when he did it in Europe, he's insane, he's overreacting, he's panicking. No, he wasn't. He should have done all of them sooner. It's just comical to listen to these people. It's anything to get Orange Man bad. That's the bottom line, Scott. Everything has been about getting Orange Man bad. They are so obsessed with Donald Trump that they'll do anything. And that's what's going on now with this insurrection. This is to make Trump look bad because most Americans are completely illiterate when it comes to civics and our political system. They don't understand our federal system because most public school systems have removed civics from junior high school or high school. They don't even learn American government. How can you have literate citizens who can't understand how a bill is presented, how their system of government works, and the fact that the President of the United States has no control over the Minneapolis Police Department whatsoever?
Right. Okay, I'll just quickly address the side chat. We've got over 650 people watching at the moment. Please, guys, remember, we have a painting that's up for auction. There it is. Money's going to a very worthwhile charity, so please consider putting a bid in. I'm not sure if we've got a bid. Have we got a bid for it yet, Marlena? The starting price is 850 Rand, which is a steal. So just be aware that that's there and available. Now,
850 Rand, Scott, that's about what, $3.50 US, right?
it's about, let me think, it's about $45 US. It's crazy. Okay, now, again, talking about South Africa in the lockdown, what I find very disturbing is that the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, just a week ago suggested that the South African economy is going to do very well because of this lockdown. And then he referred to, this is a kicker, then he referred to black economic transformation. And what I gathered from that is that what he's saying is that the lockdown will destroy, by bankrupting hundreds of thousands of small to medium-sized white businesses, which are not BEE compliant because they got none of the funds that were paid out to businesses that were BEE compliant, and that'll open up an opportunity for the well-connected, black-privileged ANC cadres to set up businesses with probably funding from the government, which fills a hole that used to be a white business. What are your thoughts about this whole thing about the lockdown in South Africa?
Well, I think that it's getting difficult for anyone who's reasonable, cogent, and thoughtful to think that there's any objective other than to impoverish white South Africans and demonize them because it's coming from the head of the state. I almost said snake, but the head of the state. Yeah,
that's probably closer to the truth.
Yeah, no, but seriously, I mean, first off, the Tourism Relief Fund denies money to minority-owned businesses, which are the bulk of tourism businesses and minority-owned. Most of the minority businesses in the travel sector are owned by whites, Indians, or colors. So they deny relief to them. So first off, you've already eliminated most of the business in the sector and kept the amount of money for a small number of people. So they took that to the court. I think Alfred Foreman and somebody else took him to the court, and the North Gauteng High Court said it wasn't discriminatory. How in the world can they make that determination? The policy is that money will not be lent to minority-owned businesses because this is in compliance with BE. Well, BE is an immoral, illegal act. I know it's a law, but it's unlawful. It's immoral. It is in direct contravention of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, of which South Africa is a party to. It doesn't have legally binding status, but it is this aspiration that people are supposed to live up to. And it also is in direct conflict with the South African Constitution, which calls for equal protection, equal treatment under the law. That's not equal treatment. So the Tourism Relief Fund, BE itself, is a racist policy meant to make it possible for connected cadres to pilfer the state from tenders, hence the term tenderpreneurs. And what's really sad about this is if minority-owned businesses, which seem to be a target by the government here, go out of business, 2 out of 3 employees for the average minority-owned business are black South Africans, not colors, not Indians, not whites.
Exactly.
They're black.
Yeah.
So you are impoverishing black South Africans to run people out of business. Why? To replace them with people who got a 32 on their math score in Matrix and let that be your construction firm that's going to build your next housing project in South Africa? Yeah. Or to hire a BEE firm that doesn't deliver textbooks to public schools in the Eastern Cape, and so these kids have no textbooks because the money went in somebody's pocket. Nobody ever prosecuted or imprisoned for that crime. This is really sad. The fact that the world's not paying attention to it is disgraceful. In the 1980s, Scott, let me just digress here back to a little bit ago. There was a comment about sanctions, someone's talking about sanctions in the chat. In 1985, Congress presented sanctions against South Africa to President Reagan. He refused to sign it because we had a policy saying that it was better to work with the South African government rather to impoverish South African people, mainly black people we were talking about.
Yeah. Congress
famously overrode his veto. So if you can override a president's veto with 2/3 majority or 3/4, it becomes law, despite the president not signing it. So 3/4 vote for it. They overrode him, and we imposed sanctions on South Africa. What gets me the height of hypocrisy is the reason that we did that ostensibly was because majority South Africans were being discriminated against. Fair argument. Under apartheid, that was a fair argument. Well, minority South Africans are being discriminated against in a fashion that is impossible to deny, yet the world is silent. Where is the Human Rights Watch? Where is Amnesty International? Where is the UN Human Rights Commission? Where is Washington, D.C.? Where is London? Where are any of these people at? As this nonsense descends into the lunacy of places like Zimbabwe, where they pass a law called the indigenization law. Now, of course, you're probably familiar with that, Scott. The indigenization law said that 51% of all equity in companies based in Zimbabwe had to be in the hands of Zimbabweans. No, wait, sorry. Not Zimbabweans, black Zimbabweans. There are white Zimbabweans and mixed race Zimbabweans and a few Indians, but it had to be in the hands of a black Zimbabwean. How is that anything but racist? In Liberia, you cannot own land in Liberia unless you're a black African. So the 4th generation Indian or Lebanese who live in Liberia are forbidden by their constitution from buying land. How is that not racist? How does the world not point out these inconsistencies?
Yeah.
Anyway, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, what I find incredibly hypocritical is that if you go back to the 60s, okay, we just go back one generation, the United States of America, and even here in Australia, they had discriminatory laws against the indigenous population in Australia and discriminatory laws in America against Africans. And that's why you had this big revolution break out in America. Now, what I find absolutely hypocritical is that you've got these lefties in America who sort of act as if America never did it, but look at South Africa. It's like pointing the bone at someone else and detracting from your own history.
No, it's Scott. There's no reason in this argument. That's the problem with people want to have a coaching discussion right now. Is you can't throw a reason because there's so much emotion being thrown out there, and there's so many people that simply don't know what they're talking about. So I grew up in the 1970s and I went to university in the 80s, and this was a time when we still had the federal courts imposing court-ordered busing in Ohio to integrate schools. So you had to take people from rural areas and shift them to inner cities where they became a minority, white students, and black students from majority black schools in inner cities to rural schools and mix them up. And that was supposed to solve the problem. It didn't, but my point is that these people who are running around, running their mouth about all this stuff, know nothing about systemic racism, institutional racism. They never experienced it. They never experienced Jim Crow. They never experienced lynchings. They never experienced being denied something. Because any slight that somebody takes, they attribute it to racism, when actually many things are simply bigotry across the board. But the thing about this is, let me just point this out. When they talk about the U.S. and systemic racism and all this stuff, Scott.
Right.
Okay, I know hundreds of black Africans who've migrated to the United States. Some are visa lottery winners, a stupid system which we're getting rid of now, thankfully, thanks to Trump. But I don't begrudge that people came here under it because they're entitled to come here. Many have become Americans. But a dumb system created by Ted Kennedy for his Irish, drinking buddies that's done severe damage to the social culture and fabric of this country.
Right.
But it's also made great contributions because a lot of these immigrants have been wonderful. But okay, so I know hundreds of Africans who've come here living on the East Coast, either through the visa lottery or they came here because of education or for work. I don't know, and I'm sure there's some out there. There are plenty of them, sure, because a lot of cab drivers in D.C. are Ethiopians who aren't wealthy. But I don't know any black Africans who have not been successful or found themselves held back in any way because of systemic racism in America. Yet the African American community in this country, not all of it, but a significant segment of it, still lives off the mythology. Now, when I say mythology, I don't mean it's false, but the narrative that's created about how you're a victim and you suffer, and we have to go back to 1619, and we have to go back to 1862, and all of this is why you can't make it. Not the fact that you knocked up your girlfriend when she was 13 years old, not the fact that your parents didn't parent you, not the fact that you went to church and ignored all the things you learned in church. No one wants to take responsibility, want to blame someone else. Here's the thing. That narrative holds back a portion of the African American community in this country. And I've lived in African American communities as a minority. Lived in a housing project, 400 families, 3 of them white.
Right.
And I was very much a minority there. And I also lived in a housing project in Buffalo, New York, in which all my classmates were Puerto Ricans or Spanish speakers, and I was the only white kid in the class who didn't speak Spanish. And I've lived all over Africa, of course. But my point is that this narrative is holding people back, and it is used on an emotional basis. Why are black Africans from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Mali, from South Africa even, from Zimbabwe especially, who come to America, all successful, 3, 5, 10 years after they've gotten here? Some have made it big. I know Africans who own businesses in this country. They own restaurants, they have franchises here that they bought into, their kids go to college. If there's systemic racism and the cops are out to hunt them down, then why aren't they being hunted down?
Yeah.
That's not the reason this is happening. And people don't want to admit what's going on, and it gets blown into something it's not. So sorry to go off on a tangent there, but I thought it was important, Scott.
Not a problem. Just briefly breaking away, the painting now has a current bid of around 2,250.
Cool.
Let's try and get to 10,000 Rand, guys. It's going to a very worthwhile charity. It's a beautiful painting. Anthony Purchase, I believe, has got the current lead bid. So for those of you who've bid on the painting, get your bids in. Right. Now, what we were just talking about there is basically how everything is just completely screwed.
Yeah.
Don't you think that the big problem in America, in South Africa, in Australia, in Europe, is that the education system now is so left-leaning and indoctrinating kids into this loony left way of thinking?
Well, I think, Scott, there's some merit there, and I'll give you an actual example to explain it. So while I was teaching at the War College, we would get summer interns from elite universities around the country. Most of the students were white, but not all. But that's just coincidence because either they had family in Carlisle and they wanted to come back here and they're looking for a summer internship, or they just heard about it and they applied for it. And but anyway, the point is that we would get I think about 30 or so interns that would work at the War College each summer. So my first summer back coming from Ethiopia, this was right when the Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, all that nonsense was going on. And these students would talk, and they'd go down and they'd sit in the cafeteria at lunchtime or on a break and sit around. And I'd always like to introduce myself to students, try to, maybe teaching moment, mentoring, that sort of thing, learn about them and share some things with them. And I wound up started doing an informal survey by asking these students for 3 summers in a row. And I said, listen, you guys are upset about these issues, but let me ask you a question. Now, these are university students. Most of them are sophomores, juniors, or sometimes a senior at top Ivy League schools around the country, mostly here on the East Coast. And I would ask them questions like, so this is all that we see in the news, this issue about race. What is America's black population? Scott, you want to take a wild guess? Not to put you on the spot. You might know, you might not know.
It's probably about 8 or 9%.
It's actually higher than that, but that's much better than the students were doing. So let me explain. So I had students on a habitual basis tell me, well, 45% of America is black, 35% of America is black. Most people would tell me somewhere between 25 and 35%. 13.5% of this country's population is black, and that population percentage is declining as a consequence of incoming migrants who are reducing and washing out the black percentage of the vote. There's about 45 million black Americans. out of 330 million of us.
Right.
13.5% of the population. But you would think that half the country is black based on the news coverage and based on the story of systemic racism and oppression. It's sad to see it. There's always something that's happening to somebody that's wrong in some circumstance. But attributing to things like this is just insane. Before this COVID-19 nonsense, the lowest recorded rate ever in unemployment among African Americans or Black Americans ever. The wealth gap between Black Americans, white Americans, and Asian Americans was declining, so that blacks were improving socioeconomically. Teen birth rates were finally coming down. Criminal justice reform, which I disagree with the way Trump did it, but he did criminal justice reform, which was giving automatic mandatory sentencing to drug offenders, which affected a lot of black men, and so it led to a high incarceration rate. That was reformed. None of this was done under Obama. None of this happened under Obama. Yet we're told that all these things are systemic. Why didn't the exalted one, Boere, fix all these things, or at least address some of them, instead of bifurcating the nation and pretending that I could have been Trayvon Martin? Not with that silver spoon in your mouth, living in Indonesia, you privileged least. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Well, just as an update, Clint Ellish now has the top bid on the painting, and we're getting towards 10,000. We're now on 4,000 Rand. So congratulations, okay. Clint. Let's keep it going, guys. Let's keep it the wheels moving. Now, you mentioned about how the birth rate amongst the blacks in America has actually slowed down considerably. I think one of the issues that South Africa's got is that the birth rate is exploding amongst the black population. And one of the reasons for that is because the government is paying them money when they have a child. So, that's like lobola. It's, you equate in the black African mind. So what do you thought? How is that going to impact South Africa?
Well, I think the real issue here, it may or may not be because of social payments that people do it. That's been an argument in the U.S. here. There's certainly a correlation to social payments and a certain percentage of people who will do that sort of thing. But I think the real issue in South Africa is a lack of education, or piss poor education. So what we found around the world, those who work in development, and my colleagues from USAID, that's our development agency, right, and others from DFID in the UK and others, and the German, which used to be GTZ, what we found out in the developing world historically is that when proper schooling, education, not simply, arithmetic, that sort of thing, memorization, but actual learning, critical thinking and learning, when girls are educated through primary school, birth rates fall precipitously. When they're educated through secondary school, they really fall off the charts. And what happens we see is that, like in KZN in South Africa, you have historically a situation where prepubescent and recently pubescent girls, in order to get their grades in many schools, are expected to sleep with their teachers. Of course, many of whom are HIV positive, never using condoms, and so ending lives prematurely and spreading HIV around. And of course, upsetting the entire social environment in which girls learn the wrong things about their body and how they're supposed to interact with others. But education is the key here. And the ANC seems not at all interested in improving education. In fact, they seem interested in dumbing it down and making it even worse. The sad tragedy, I think, for South Africa is that, yes, there was ban to education, and most black South Africans didn't get a decent education. That's hard to deny. Right. But the ANC has not fixed that problem. In fact, if anything, they made it far worse. Unlike Zimbabwe, where I will give Mugabe, the tin pot dictator, a little credit, ZANU-PF did pour money into public schools for black Zimbabweans and wound up with a very high literacy rate and a very well-educated population, at least through secondary school. In South Africa's case, it's quite the opposite. How in the world can you stand with a straight face in front of the nation and be proud of the fact that a passing score on any exam is 30%? That's insane. It's absolutely crazy. Insane. Absolutely crazy. It is absolutely insane, and I think that has a lot to do with what's going on. It's encouraging people to have more kids because they don't know better. They don't know the opportunities and what their role in life is and the proper social interactions between men and women. It's funny you should mention that because I saw something earlier about Leon Schuster. Can we get to that? I want to mention the Leon Schuster thing. Someone asked me about that. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. Okay, sure. So we actually have a couple of questions there about Leon Schuster. Anthony Purchase said, at Chris Wyatt, what is your views on Leon Schuster's movies being labeled as racist and removed? And another question, what does he think about Leon Schuster's movies being removed? I mean, he worked his entire life on them, and now they're under threat. Well, I think it's the cancel culture run amok, and it's absolutely ludicrous. It's like tearing down statues of George Washington, or more importantly, here in the States, in Philadelphia, there's a famed abolitionist who took his own money, raised money to help blacks escape from slave states in the South by paying people bribes and paying for them to get through and paying people off, officials, and then brought them to Philadelphia and then provided free education for them to become educated. And his statue was defaced, and then they painted KKK and called him a slaver and a racist. These people have no idea what they're doing. And the same, now let me carry this over to Leon Schuster. Leon Schuster's movies, a lot of black South Africans are up in arms. They're hot full of all this nonsense about this thing about, Showmax canceling Leon Schuster movies because a lot of black South Africans find it humorous. Now, you're never going to please everybody. The Washington Redskins are called the Redskins, and there's some groups that claim that that's racist against Indians. I've never looked at it that way. It's a proud Indian. It's not a caricature. There's a big difference between Afri-Cola, which is a German soft drink, having a picture of an African with a bone through his nose and big lips and a character to make him look silly, which is what was on their can of Coca-Cola for 30 or 40 years. Yeah. There's a big difference between that and a picture of a beautiful black woman selling syrup called Aunt Jemima in the States. This cancel culture is caustic. And with Leon Schuster, there's a lot of white South Africans during the days he made his movies who got the subtle point that was in Leon Schuster's movie, whether it was intentional or not, that he was going over the top to show the stupidity of racism, bigotry, and discrimination.
Yeah.
And so canceling Leon Schuster is just brain dead. So what's next? The gods must be crazy because it makes Bushmen look stupid? No, the white people in that movie look stupid. It was hilarious, but they're going to cancel Gods Must Be Crazy before it's over.
Right. Now, just on that same theme, what I find extraordinary is that the book Black Beauty was banned because of its title. Noddy and Big Ears. Think about Noddy and Big Ears. Just crazy.
So Scott, so this is what I said on my stream. I said, so here's the deal. Okay, so we can't have Aunt Jemima on syrup or pancake mix. We can't have Uncle Ben's, because he's a black man, a very well-dressed black man, as the brand representing rice. We can't have any of these references. So if I open a cereal brand and I call it Viking Flakes, right, and I put pictures of blue-eyed Vikings on there, will I get away with that? Because I'm not denigrating blacks. I'm just promoting Vikings.
That'll be seen as racist.
Of course it'll be seen as racist. So are we all supposed to be the same, androgynous, gray, bland? What's the point of living? We should celebrate our differences. People are entitled to their differences. And if you're not being abusive, and Leon Schuster is not abusive, he's hysterical. Blacks and whites find, and coloreds and Indians and others find Leon Schuster to be hysterical. Now, some of his later films were kind of lame, but he did some really funny stuff early on. So it's just, it's nonsense. Listen, these days, Richard Pryor would be banned. They would call him a white privilege guy because of the stuff he said. It's just insane. So they try to get rid of everything that they possibly can, and they have no grounding. And here's the thing I always say, Scott. If we're supposed to learn from how people misbehave, when it's all wiped out of the literature, when all the statues are gone, when all the video is gone, when Gone with the Wind is removed, when all these movies are taken away, how are we supposed to know if something's wrong? Only by some elite telling us that we're wrong? We wait for their direction? That's cock.
Yeah, well, what it's doing is it's making people very bland. I think that just the existence of, and I'm not talking like Black Beauty, I mean, I think that was ridiculous, but I've got some very old books, African books, which are using the K word. In fact, one of them actually has it in the title, and it's how people actually talked back then in the 1800s. Now, I think books like that are very educational because you can see how society has changed. Now, if you take those books out of out of circulation, basically you're destroying the actual way society has evolved, because it then becomes like it's always been this way, and it hasn't.
Yeah, no, it's Scott. It's so. Someone asked in the chat here. They said, "What about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer? Will they be attacked?" They have been attacked. They were attacked 10, 15 years ago as Mark Twain was racist. It's just utter insanity. Those books are banned in a number of public school systems in America. Can you imagine? Huckleberry Finn.
Crazy.
Banned in America. Mark Twain, one of the single greatest authors in the history of this country. Yeah. So I saw last week that apparently, Scott, I'm a racist unless I clean off all my bookshelves, get rid of Thucydides, get rid of Mark Twain, get rid of Faulkner, get rid of Steinbeck, get rid of William Shakespeare, Chaucer. I have to remove all that off my shelf. And then my bookshelves must be full of only African-American authors, or like Toni Morrison, who puts you to sleep, in the middle of a windstorm, she'd put me to sleep. Her books are horrible. They're pedantic. I tried to read her. It's lame. Why she was famous, I can only surmise. But my point is that I'm a racist unless my bookshelves are full of only African American authors. Now, how is that not racist or bigoted? To tell me I can only have black authors on my shelves.
Yeah.
By the way, I have black authors. I have Thomas Sowell on my shelf. I have many others on my shelf who are black authors. I have African authors, Cheque Acc. I have lots of Cheque Acc, lots of black authors on my shelf, which I read. But I'm not going to be dictated by some elite fascist who is trying to tell me that I'm a racist when I know what's in my heart. It's interesting. When I was on LinkedIn a couple years ago, and someone I'm trying to get a guest on my channel had published something after Winnie Mandela died on LinkedIn, and the person posted a YouTube video saying, "What's wrong with these people? Why are they attacking Mama Africa?" And so I was curious. I went and watched. It was a white South African who was saying, "Listen, Winnie Mandela was convicted of kidnapping, stomping, which led to his death. She was also convicted of corruption as a member of parliament. So she was convicted under the MP, the apartheid government. She was also convicted by the ANC government. She's a complicated woman. She did play a role in the struggle, and we recognize that. But this wailing and this like she's some greatest figure in history going on is a bit over the top." So I responded back and I said, "Listen, I read what you said, and I went and watched the video, and the gentleman wasn't disrespectful, he wasn't dishonest, and he wasn't malicious or mean about Winnie Mandela. He's just making the point that people are going over the top." And I was attacked instantly on LinkedIn. Now, bear in mind, Scott, this is a serving officer in my uniform, giving my position. I didn't say anything racial.
Right.
And I just said the gentleman has a point. And I was attacked by a whole host of the standard trolls and racists. Oh, he's just a KKK colonizer, yada, 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 yada. And so my response, because I was representing the Army, even though it was my personal account, is, listen, you don't know what's in my heart. I venture to say that I probably improved or bettered or saved the lives of more Africans than you ever aspired to. And if you actually have a legitimate charge to lay against me, please put it out there. But I suspect that you don't. Anyway, so he came back, and a couple others doing that for about a day or two. And what I like about LinkedIn is about 100 of my followers and supporters came back. "You know nothing about Colonel Wyatt. He's the least racist person I've ever met. You don't know what he's done for Africans of all races, Arabs, blacks, mixed race, whites in Africa. You know nothing about him." And they chased the trolls away.
Right. Now, I just want to show you something that's quite extraordinary. Have a look at my camera now.
Okay.
Now, that is apparently hate speech in South Africa. It stands proudly on my wall. It's to me, it's a symbol, a huge historical symbol of what was South Africa. No,
it is. It's a historical symbol. It's not a symbol of hate. Not at all. Any more so than Zulus toying or carrying knob carries or foisting spears is any more a symbol of hate from the betrayal of Dingane against Pete Retief and his party and the murder of innocent civilians and children, and women and children. That's not a symbol of hate either. If the Zulu want to be proud of their heritage, that's fine. If they want to carry their shields and do dances, that's not hate, and that flag is not a symbol of hate either. That's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That flag predates apartheid.
It does.
And so, people that say that it's hate are just idiots and know nothing about history, and they're just fools. And unfortunately, a lot of them are judges and members of government in South Africa, and so it is something that has been discriminated against. I don't personally like the flag. I always thought, not to offend anybody, I always thought it was a bit silly having the British flag and the Free State and the Transvaal all on one flag. I never really got into it. Not denigrating the flag, I'm just saying it wasn't my thing. I didn't like it. I actually like the new South African flag. That's probably going to get me flamed because it was supposed to be a kind of a reconciliation, everybody come together, and folks were represented. It was kind of interesting. It's a lot better than the Bosnian flag. I was in Bosnia when they came up with that. That's a sad one.
Now, I just want to just revert to something you said earlier. We were talking about the education system. And the Minister of Education, who was this African lady, said in Parliament, and this is not a lie, this is what she said. She said, "What is important in education are the 3 R's. And then she said, they are reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, obviously it's reading and then W for writing and A for arithmetic. So.
Right. No, but I mean, to be fair, Scott, that's an old expression in America. That's reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's where I would assume she got it from there. So I mean, I wouldn't beat her up too much about that. But I would simply talk. I could talk at length about the outcomes, about the lunacy. So let's talk about COVID-19. Kids haven't been in school for 3 months. Yeah. What are you cleaning in schools? What are you cleaning? The virus doesn't last for 3 months on the surface. It can't. The RNA degrades and falls apart. So if nobody's been in schools for 3 months, then you don't have COVID-19. So what are you doing? Why do you have to sanitize the schools? This is utter stupidity. I don't understand this. Now, I get the point that maybe you want to go in and clean the toilets up and wipe the tables down, and then clean up the kitchen, of course, because people haven't been eating on a regular basis. But you don't have to, fog the damn building down and spray it down because of COVID-19. There is no COVID-19 in the schools. Assuming the school hasn't been burned down and vandalized like they have in the Eastern Cape. 1,600 schools destroyed in South Africa during COVID-19. Can you imagine this lunacy?
Well, I can tell you why they're doing it, and it's quite simple. Someone's got the tender, one of the ANC connected people, to get the cleaning done, and it's like the new motorbikes. Have you seen the motorbikes which are now going to transport people who are sick around the place in the Eastern Cape? You can buy them for 17,000 Rand on the internet per unit, and apparently the government paid 100,000 Rand per unit on 100 of these. If it's a highway to hell being on one of those in the Eastern Cape roads, believe me. But that's the situation there. Now let's again address the side chat. What's the current price for the painting? I think it's 4,000 Rand, isn't it? I'm just going to put it up there.
Last I saw.
Yeah, that's Clint Ellish. Okay, guys, there it is. Please get your bids in. It is going to be sold today, so don't miss out. Now, I'm going to start putting some of the questions that I've received in the side chat to Chris, so we can actually go through those. Okay, Peter Paul has asked, please ask Chris about Q. I think he's talking about QAnon. You know that guy that Trump refers to? The fellow who's on social media?
I'm actually not familiar. Is this related to Bolton's book or something?
No, this is totally unrelated. This is a guy who puts up sort of like cryptic messages and things like that.
No, I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry.
Okay. Right. Dagbreker asks, can Colonel Wyatt get Scott nostalgic about Tanzania? I grew up in Tanzania. But that's one country you didn't visit, really, did you? I mean, you've been all over the rest of East Africa.
No, I've actually been there, Scott. I've been to Tanzania. I've been to Arusha. I've been to Dar. I've been to Zanzibar, to Ngorongoro Crater, to the Masai Mara. I've been all over northern part. I haven't been in the southern part. I have been to Lake Malawi. Sorry, I know they like to say Lake Nyasa on the other side, but Lake Malawi, where I could see Tanzania from that side. But yeah, I have been there. It's a fascinating country, and of course, famously a country in which its president embarked on the wrong path of socialism and destroyed the economy, and people suffered miserably for 20 years before he finally realized that, oh, this isn't working, and he turned it around, and then eventually the country headed on the free market path. Although the current president is not heading the country in the right direction. His predecessor, Kikwete, was much better, so we'll see what happens there. But no, Tanzania is wonderful, fantastic place to visit. I recommend it to anybody to go there. People are easy to get along with. You can speak Swahili there. And if you don't speak Swahili, it's easy to learn. You can learn enough on a vacation to get by with some key phrases that'll help you out. It's fantastic. Really, really, really enjoy Tanzania.
Well, Swahili is one of the oldest languages on Earth. Now, interesting, because when we talk about Ngorongoro Crater, that image that I've got on the screen right now is actually taken at Ngorongoro Crater. It's a sunrise when I was there in 2016. You can see the edge of the crater in the background. It's 30 kilometers wide, and basically it's got its own ecosystem inside. It's an extraordinary place. But what a fabulous photo. That's why I just keep it up on my computer.
Yep, it's completely ringed by that crater, the entire thing. It's an extinct volcano. It's amazing. A lot of the wildlife got in there hundreds of years ago and
they
couldn't get back out.
Yeah.
Right. So they, other than birds, of course, but I mean the large things like the elephants and the lions, of course, are the result of breeding that's taking place inside the crater. So they're developing different genetic differences based on herds outside the crater, which is a fascinating thing if you're into genetics.
Yeah. Okay. Now, it's me again has asked, what is the Colonel's connection to South Africa?
Oh, that's a good question, Scott. So, yeah, I read in the 70s when I was a kid, the liberation struggles were taking place in Rhodesia, and Mozambique and Angola, and I followed those things with great interest in school. And then around 1980, a book came out, actually before 80, I think it's 79, by what's his name right now? Anyway, it's called The Covenant. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but he also was the author of Hawaii and Space and lots of other things. But The Covenant was about South Africa. It's historical fiction. And I really, Hank says 9 languages, 6 languages, yep. So The Covenant was about South African historical fiction, taking actual events and creating historical figures, and taking fictional characters and mixing them in and telling a story. And he did this all the time. And it was a fantastic author. I really fell in love with South Africa, all the different people. I said, wow, what a crazy, screwed up country this is, but it's fascinating. And so my interest in South Africa went from there. I was introduced to rugby at university in 1982 and fell in love with the game of rugby, even though I didn't understand it. But of course, there was no rugby on television. As a budding historian, I went and looked to see what the most successful rugby nations were around the world, and I saw that South Africa was right up there. Since I had an interest in South Africa, I became a Springbok fan in 1984, and have followed the Springboks ever since. In 1985, after I'd become proficient and fluent in German, I decided that I would try to learn Afrikaans so that I could better understand the mindset of the National Party and why apartheid was so important. And the reason for that is because when I learned German, I discovered that when you learn another people's language, you learn something innately about their culture and how people think. For instance, in German, people think very differently than they do in English. So I tried to learn Afrikaans as a consequence of that. And that's where my interest in South Africa came from. When I went back to university after leaving the Army in 87, I concentrated almost all my history classes on Africa, and most of those were in Southern Africa, with the Cordon Sanitaire and the total onslaught situation going on in South Africa. And I did research papers on Namibia, ethnic Germans, and South Africa, and it just kind of grew from there. The commencement speaker at my graduation at university in 1989 was Kwet Masiri, the president of Botswana, who came to Ohio University and gave a speech to about 8,000 of us, 9,000 of us graduating that day. And anyway, so my interest has always been there, and it's just grown from that. And that's just kind of it in a nutshell. I could go on longer, but I think that covers it.
Right. Okay. Cool. Now,
I was going to say, people are wondering, so you've never been there? No, I've been to South Africa about 450 times total over the years. Over the years. And I lived in Botswana, and so I went to South Africa almost every weekend because I was in Gaborone. I go to Rustenburg or to Pretoria and sometimes Joburg and such. So I've been pretty much everywhere in the country, except ironically, I've never been to Kruger, I've never been to the Northern Cape, and I've never been to the Eastern Cape. But beyond that, I've been everywhere, the Drakensberg, KZN, Western Cape, Gauteng, all over the place. Anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, the Drakensberg's got to be one of the most beautiful places on earth. I had a farm there. Now, just talking about this whole connection with Africa, whenever I fly to Africa from Australia, it's when I see the coast of Africa, it's almost like a spiritual calling, because I was born in Dar es Salaam, I grew up in Africa, and it's almost like it calls out to you and says, welcome home. It's an incredible feeling for people who live overseas, and I'm sure anyone else who's watching this live stream at the moment, where they fly back to South Africa, they get that same incredible feeling of, being welcomed home. Now, I have a question for you here.
Sure.
Who has been the most influential person, in your opinion, in your time, or in our time?
In our lifetime?
Yeah.
In the world? Because I think it would have to be, well, it's hard to say a single person, but I can say from an American perspective, there's someone that comes to mind right at the top list, hands down, easy to say. And of course, that person had an extension on much of the world. So I think that's probably the single most important important figure in my lifetime would be Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Some would be like, what? But no. Reagan, former Democrat, former actor, former head of the Screen Actors Guild, successful businessman, and governor of California, single-handedly changed the narrative for a declining America and brought the Soviet Union to its knees with his policies and ended the Cold War. Now, it ended on George Bush's watch, but it only ended because of the policies of Ronald Reagan. Now, unfortunately, towards the end of his second term, he clearly had dementia or Alzheimer's and wasn't quite all there. And a few different things happened which kind of tarnished his reputation in the eyes of the left, but not in my eyes. Ronald Reagan is the single most important figure in my lifetime, I would argue, bar none.
Right. Okay.
Oh, and the author was James Michener. Somebody pointed out, thank you. I was having a senior moment there. James Michener. The Covenant.
Look, I have senior moments all the time, so I know what you're talking about. They call me the old fart on the channel.
I was called an old geezer the other day because I've grown my Pete Retief beard and my hair is long now. But for those that go to my website or to my YouTube channel, you'll notice that I posted the video from August, and most of my regular subscribers have said, "Who is this imposter? That's not Colonel Wyatt. This guy's 20 years younger than him." Without the beard and with normal short hair, I look about 20 years younger. So anyway, just saying.
Yeah. Now, just a follow-up question on Ronald Reagan. What do you think Ronald Reagan would say if he didn't have dementia and he was back at his peak about what has happened to the Democratic Party in recent times? And look at it today.
Oh, I think Ronald Reagan would eviscerate the Republican Party. Donald Trump doesn't have anywhere near the gift of communication, although he has his own means of communication. But Ronald Reagan could disarm the most dangerous of radicals with a soft insult or a joke. It was just amazing. I think one of the most famous things about Ronald Reagan is when he had his debate for re-election against Mondale, and Mondale raised the issue of age, or the moderator did. And he said, well, since the subject of age, because Ronald Reagan was famously the oldest president, serving president at the time. And he said, I said, something along the lines that, I think age is an issue here, but if you don't mind, I won't hold it against my opponent's youth and inexperience against him, which, is just very, very disarming. So, yeah, no, but Reagan would set a lot of people straight in Reagan's prime and political era, which would be, when he was president, the first 5 or 6 years of his presidency. That we would have a very different narrative in this country, even with the mainstream media being as dishonest as they are. They couldn't help but put Reagan on TV, and he would be very alarmed because he was a Democrat for many years. Yeah. He didn't become a Republican until later in life. It's ironic with the entertainment industry and the IT industry doxing and shadow banning and things like Katie Hopkins being banned from Twitter ridiculously and things like that. It's ironic because the entertainment industry was deeply conservative for decades in Hollywood. Right. In fact, they tie a lot of this to the nonsense what you call McCarthyism, and they talk about the Senate Armed Service Committee. Of course, it wasn't the Senate; it was in the House where most of that was taking place. And so Senator McCarthy gets the tag for McCarthyism, but. It's at that stage, Hollywood was very conservative, and they were complaining about being blackballed because they were leftist. Well, now the leftists aren't being blackballed. They're the ones doing the blackballing, and they're doing it in quite a serious way. James Woods is consistently banned on Twitter for saying nothing or simply retweeting some lunatic thing that some leftist puts out there. The leftist never gets attacked, but Woods gets banned. It's a useless platform.
Right. Now, just on that same subject, Louise has asked, can Chris Wyatt go and speak to Trump about what is happening in South Africa? And I think she's referring to how Ramaphosa is claiming that there are no farm murders in South Africa, especially when it comes to the white population.
Well, I think that DC is aware that that's nonsense. It's the thing is that people, when I say this, like, what are you talking about? I mean, Lana Marks has been saying all the most outrageous things. I guess you missed that, Scott. I called her Banana Marks. No, but so Lana Marks has been saying the most outrageous. I remember watching her on Valdemar Petzer's program, in which he said, he asked her, so what do you think of President Ramaphosa? She goes, I think he's amazing. He's wonderful. He's doing such wonderful. His programs are, basically she was being very sycophantic. Yeah. And he said, so how many times have you met with him? Oh, I've never met him.
Oh, jeez.
Seriously? Anyway, this is what she said several months ago. She's never met the man, and she thinks his policies. Now, as a diplomat, she's got certain things that she's got certain left and right limits as to how she can engage and what she can say, because she's representing the president, and you may or may not want to call a country out, publicly. So I understand that, but running around and propping up Cyril Ramaphosa is just utter nonsense. Our embassy would be better served if it simply said nothing rather than saying that nonsense, because people will say, oh, look, the Americans say it's okay, so there must be nothing going on in this country. And I think it's a detriment to the policy. Now, I am available. I'll get a haircut. I'm happy if when Trump wins re-election, if he's looking for a new ambassador to Pretoria, I'll make myself available. I love Hatfield. It's a beautiful area. I've been to that embassy, so I don't have to give me a tour. I know where my office will be. I'm just saying I'm available for the next term.
Well, it's funny because Dagbriek has actually asked that question. He said, can Colonel Wyatt replace Lana Marks as ambassador to South Africa? And
easily. It just takes an appointment and then Senate confirmation.
Just on the subject of Trump and the farm murders, one of the people I have on my live stream quite regularly is a fellow by the name of Bartlett, and he calls himself Buffalo Bartlett, and he's currently walking from Austin, Texas, all the way up to Washington, D.C., with the aim of actually having a meeting with Trump to talk about farm murders in South Africa. And it's been an epic walk. We're actually following it on the channel. Oh, Clint Ellis has asked, please ask Chris, what was the CIA's involvement with Dr. Favut's assassination?
I'm not aware that the CIA was involved. Of course, that was before my lifetime or around the time I was born. So I'm not aware of them having been involved in this assassination.
Yeah.
There are conspiracy theories out there. I don't know what was gained by it for the U.S. I don't know that anything was gained by it. So has the CIA been involved in attempted assassinations of others? Absolutely. Absolutely. Until public law was passed, that was certainly the case. They tried to kill Castro several times, and they were inept, unfortunately. But he wasn't the only foreign politician or leader that they had a role in. But of late, that hasn't been the case. But I don't know anything about that. I've heard that conspiracy theory before. But again, I don't know what we gain from that. You always have to ask, so who gains? You can always find someone that you think is plausible as having gained from it. But anyway, I know nothing about that.
Well, I've heard that Donald Trump has had a few assassination attempts made on him in recent months. Have you heard about that?
I have not, but I wouldn't be surprised. The Secret Service is dealing with stuff. Now, there have been threats against the president. There's daily threats, and there have been people incarcerated for them. There were threats against Obama, and people went to jail for it. People think that they can just run their mouths on social media and there are no consequences. Well, threaten the president of the United States and see how well that goes for you. There's no such thing as anonymous, ladies and gentlemen. All these people claim that you have anonymous accounts. No. Look, I worked at the National Security Agency. You think you can hide? No, you can't. You want to run your mouth on Twitter and attack people? Go ahead. There are repercussions if they choose to pursue you.
Well, what about VPNs? If you got a VPN, can they still catch you?
I can neither confirm nor deny what can happen with VPNs.
Okay, I'll take that a yes.
My recommendation to people is just behave yourself and be, you live by the golden rule when online, and then you should be fine.
Right. Now, Dan Berryman has asked,
yes.
With incidents on China and India's border, and this is a huge explosive issue, and China and South China Sea and the feelings of President Trump, do you think that things are escalating in the world today? And I just read the other day that India has put its warships and its fighter planes on standby. You heard about that?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of my sorry, I got an echo there. A lot of subscribers on my channel have been asking about that issue. So I took a closer look at it. In fact, it is an issue. But the thing is that the only advantage here I think that's taking place, or unusual thing, is that with the world's attention diverted by the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19 hysteria and or hoax, whichever it is, China is getting away with the people being distracted, not paying attention to what's happening in South China Sea. They attacked a Vietnamese ship last week, and the world didn't notice. Now these border incursions, but this is happening on the border between China and its neighbors all the time. This is not unusual. It also happens between India and Pakistan on almost a daily, weekly basis. So what's interesting is it actually got some attention in the press and people are talking about it. But the Chinese are getting away with all kinds of things while the world's attention is diverted elsewhere, and it's really sad. Now, I don't say that as a xenophobe or someone that hates China. China is a nation state in the Westphalian system of states, and it acts in its own interest. But I know who they are. I've worked with the Chinese in Africa when it came to security and peacekeeping and things like that. And I've also seen the Chinese exploit people in Africa. I've also seen them deliver excellent buildings and products and services on occasion, but all the Africans running around going, the Chinese are our friend, are wrong, and all the Westerners and Africans running going, the Chinese are evil, are wrong. It's somewhere in the middle, but I'm kind of like Reagan, trust but verify. And that was his famous phrase with the Soviets, trust but verify. Right. The Chinese tell me something, I'm going to have to go see that they actually did it. So the Chinese built a wonderful parliament building in Malawi for the Malawi government. But the Chinese also built a railroad in Botswana back in the 80s, and it's in disuse because it was crap and it fell apart. And they built a power station there in the past few years. Built three power plants, and only one at a time works. So it's lucky to get 25 to 35% of the expected electricity generation based on the substandard quality of what they put in there. So anyway, you got to know who you're dealing with. But a lot of people who follow me seem to think that I dislike China. I don't dislike China. I'm just honest about China from my perspective.
Right. Now, just talking about China, there have been some reports in some pretty solid mainstream newspapers online, which I've been reading, about how China could deliver, using hypersonic weaponry, an EMP across America, which would, cut out or fry the whole of the electrical grid in America. And as a result, they're saying that within about a year or 2 years, 90% of the population of America would die. Have you heard those reports?
You're talking about from radiation weapons?
No, EMP. Ones that fry the electrical system and destroy.
Well, I wouldn't lead to 90% of the population dying, but what it would do is it would destroy electronics, and we wouldn't be having this discussion right now because people wipe out the electronics of this. But it will wipe out what's currently in use. If something's disconnected from the grid and not connected to power or shielded, then it's not going to be affected by it. But yeah, EMP weapons, that's of course been one of the things we learned about nuclear weapons. When we first had atomic weapons, we discovered that electromagnetic pulse came from those huge blasts, and does have an impact. But it's the Chinese have been working in that area. But it's not just the Chinese. We have to worry about our sun. We lose electronics all the time to solar flares, particularly these large solar flare storms. So one reason for Space Force, to have better awareness of what's happening and better warning about things like that, whether it's Chinese or others, or just natural events like the sun. So Donald Trump will be remembered for his vision to create Space Force, despite the fact that the media made fun of him and they criticized his flag for Space Force. But he will be remembered for his vision. And I will remember him, and I'm happy also to become a member of Space Force.
Oh, lovely. Isn't that a cool logo?
Yeah, unfortunately, it comes from China, and the ink pattern is not very good. Yeah, I had to wait for it to come from China when I ordered it. But anyway, yeah, that's Space Force. There you go.
Okay, let's get to some more questions. We've got quite a few questions here for you. Rob Roy says, which African country, in your opinion, is the safest to live in? I'd have to say Mauritius.
Mauritius would definitely be safe. I would say that Botswana is also famously safe. Namibia is very safe too, although there are a few challenges because of remoteness. But Botswana is safe. Rwanda is safe. Senegal is safe. Cape Verde is safe. There's a number of countries. Mauritius, I think, would definitely be near the top of the list. That's a country that just works, and nobody gives a crap what you look like or where you come from. It's how you contribute. That's what matters. And I think that's one of the secrets of Mauritius' success. They've not focused on people's origins or their appearance. They focus on what you can bring to the table, and they've done a pretty good job. Now, of course, it's a tiny country; it's physically limited, so there's only so much can happen there. But there's a number of places in Africa where it's very safe. While I have issues with Kagame as the leader of Rwanda, it's time for him to leave the stage. He has put a system of governance in place that has, by and large, been fantastic for the country and for the people since he took over. It's just time for him to leave. By comparison, his former good friend, Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, has been in office a bit longer, since '86, about 6 years longer, and we can argue that his tenure has been far less successful than what Kagame has done in Rwanda.
Right. Now, just for a quick chat to the side chat, we've got over 600 people still watching. We had well over 700 a while ago. There's the painting, guys. I think the top bid at the moment is 4,000 Rand. Come on, let's hit 5,000. Let's do this, okay? All the money's going to a really needy charity. Really needs the money. Okay.
No, that's really cool, Scott. By the way, if I could interject there, some people told me about you selling things on the channel, but then I started watching the channel. It looks like most of what you're doing is really raising money for charities, and that's really good. I appreciate that you do that to help folks out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, look, we raised 21,000 Rand for the painting we sold last week, and that went to a charity, and we've raised over R1 million on this channel over the last 2 years, which has all gone to charity.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, Strong Angel has asked, before the Boer arrived, why were there no Caucasians, Chinese, etc. on the continent of Africa, if, as claimed, it is the cradle of all mankind? What drove them away? Well,
good sense. My ancestors lived in East Africa. It was too damn hot, and there was competition. So they got across through Yemen and got there and said, this place sucks too. And then they kept moving north and eventually wound up in the Caucasus. Too many saber-toothed cats around. They gave up on it and moved westward to northern Europe, got less and less sun. Skin got lighter and lighter over time. About 10,000 years ago, a genetic mutation produced blue eyes. And the rest is history. That's why you don't find Caucasians and Asians coming from Africa. These are how people have developed over time from different locations, if you believe in evolution. So anyway, I'm not a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there, but not that much tongue-in-cheek. It's actually the truth.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting fable that the Fijians believe in. They believe they came from Tanganyika. And they believe they came there through the Chinese who used to do trade. And I guess they were taken across to the Pacific and they landed up on the Fijian Islands, and apparently that's how they started, cohabiting on the Fijian Islands. That's the fable. I mean, it's just part of their history, their local history. Okay.
No, it's interesting. It's but the Chinese actually got to Africa. Admiral Cheng Ho famously did multiple voyages to the east coast of Africa and got as far as about Maputo in Mozambique when he went back to China, and that was it. There was a change of dynasty, and they lost interest in exploring the world. But for a fate of history and internal domestic politics in China, you may have found Chinese in southern and eastern Africa for centuries before Europeans, a century before Europeans began to arrive. It would have been a very different outcome.
Right. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Rhino Shock Fundamerva asks, please ask about the underground wars, if it is actually happening.
Underground wars.
I think he's talking about like the New World Order and, these hidden organizations.
Well, there's definitely hidden organizations out there politically that raise money to support insurrectionists and agitators and political nonsense that's going on around the world. But we'd have to ask about a specific one. That's just a general statement.
Yeah. Okay. Beanie Tehran asks, what does Chris think about Jesse Lee Peters?
I sound like I'm very uninformed today. Who's Jesse Lee Peters?
I think he's got a social media page or something like that.
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't have any thought on Jesse Lee Peters. Yeah. I haven't seen that channel, so my apologies.
Okay. Hey, suck my socks. I had to stop myself before I thought it was something else. Okay. Hey, suck my socks says, would Chris consider ambassador to SA position instead of Lana Marks? We have actually covered that, so I'll get rid of that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If it was offered to me, I would do it. Absolutely.
Nicholas Brakey says, are the Western globalists working with the CCP?
Okay, let me answer it from the following fashion. Okay, so, Scott, I'm sorry, Scott. So I actually scheduled my stream for about 5 minutes from now. I just put a note telling people I'm still on with you, so I don't have to rush off. But let me answer that by saying it this way. Yes, from the standpoint that large businesses in the West have been in collusion with the Chinese government to offshore industrial production in China for the past 25 years. Sadly, it was the United States that sponsored China's entry into the World Trade Organization, and they famously entered in 2000. But of course, the suckers or the fools that misled us, whichever they were, assumed or didn't care that China would follow the rules of the World Trade Organization, which of course they violated since the moment they came in, with artificial and real barriers, whether it's tariffs or production limits for our goods getting into China. When I say our, I'm talking about everybody else, while they export all their stuff and they amass currency from the trade that's advantageous to them. So yeah, that definitely has been the case. So for instance, Google, and we're on a Google platform now because they own YouTube, but Google colluded with the Chinese Communist Party to block ethnic Chinese from getting search results for keyword terms in multiple languages from China. So say you're in Shanghai and you want to search about, an issue that the Chinese government doesn't want you to know, like say the Dalai Lama or Taiwan, good governance in Taiwan. They block those searches so that you can't get them because the Chinese Communist government asked them or told them to do it. And to me, that's just nonsense. That shouldn't be happening. Now, that's very different than, say, the telecommunications industry in America cooperating with our government to allow us to have ways to intrude in conversations. Now, that's a very different situation, but make sure people don't think I'm a hypocrite here. I'm talking about both sides of this. Anyway.
Right. Okay. Guys, I'm going to stop taking questions after. I've just got the last one from Philippe here, because we don't want to take up Chris's evening. He's got other stuff he has to do. Just very quickly, Chris. Philippe van Velbergen has asked, please ask the Colonel for his views on the 9/11 events. Does he accept the official version as a fair version of events?
Well, I'm not so sure what he means by the official version, but I think what he means by the official version is that a group of folks with Al-Qaeda, inspired by Osama bin Laden, put together a plot to knock down the house. If that's what he means by the official version, Yeah, I do endorse that. Folks, remember, I was working inside the intelligence community when this happened without disclosing things that I can't talk about. I have no lack of confidence that that's exactly what happened. And the reason it was possible is because we're a democracy and we were not approaching terrorism as a national security threat. We approached it as a law enforcement issue. Even after they tried to destroy the World Trade Center in 1994, and the FBI and the Counterterrorism Task Force investigated this and found out that they were serious about it. Not even after Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden declared war on us, we still treated it as a law enforcement issue. Consequently, a lot of things have been put in place in our country to prevent abuses that took place by the intelligence agencies in the 1960s and 70s when we were spying on Americans. So those restrictions remain in place. So, for instance, as a counterintelligence agent in the Army, I was not allowed to share certain information that I collected with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. There was an order in place by the Department of Justice that prevented certain information, and that's why you had people taking flying schools in Florida in which they said, "Well, don't teach me how to fly. I don't care about landing. I just want to know how to get the plane in the air." And that's just sending all alarm bells off. You know, you have this Arab guy from the Middle East who can barely speak English, who comes to Florida, pays cash to go to a flight school, and he doesn't want to know how to land the plane. He just wants to know how to fly the plane. And he's asking about airspeeds. That information was actually reported by some, now this happened in different locations in the country, it was actually reported by flight instructors to local law enforcement officials and or the FBI, and nothing came of it because they didn't tie things together with the stuff that the Treasury Department was tracking for funding, along with immigration violations that INS at the time, Immigration Act. So the point was that the whole system was set up, our government ineptly, to keep us from pursuing this as a war. And as a consequence, we were vulnerable. And we paid a price for it. And the world has paid a price for it ever since. A lot of things have been put in place to prevent that from happening, but honestly, some of it's gone too far, and we need a kind of a readjustment to bring it back kind of in the middle. You got to protect liberty and freedom while you're protecting safety. You can't just have one or the other. You got to have both. Right. And we went too far to protecting liberty, and then too far to protecting safety, and we got to find our way back to the middle so we protect people and our national security while also protecting their freedoms. Your Constitution, your freedom means nothing if you can't assemble. You can't practice your religion free. You can't carry weapons, as we're guaranteed in our Constitution, if you cannot speak your mind. If those things are not allowed, if you're tamped down by IT tech titans, if you're tamped down by doxing people and by people out there threatening you based on your opinions because they can't have a cogent conversation with you because your ideas are something they can't refute and they simply call you names, you don't have real freedom. And these are the struggles we face today around the world.
Right. Okay, I'm going to just give you one last question. But before I do, we'll be shutting down the auction in a couple of minutes, and the current bid is now 5,000 Rand. That's a great outcome. Please, guys, if you're going to get your bid in, you've got to do it right now because we are going to shut down that auction very shortly. Now, the final question for you, Chris, is from Matthew James, and he says, "Ask Chris if China could be supporting the Black Lives Matter movement to divert attention from Wuhan and the coronavirus."
That's a good question, actually, but I don't think that China could. Of course, they have the resources to do it, but I don't see any real benefit for them in doing it. There's enough distractions taking place that they don't have to. I mean, look, the world, nobody's questioning the Chinese. Nobody's talking anymore about this came from a biohazard lab in Wuhan, or why didn't the Chinese shut down Wuhan 3 weeks earlier? Why didn't they give us the RNA? The Chinese mapped the RNA out the first week of January 3rd. They mapped out the RNA for this virus. It wasn't until the 9th of January that they told the world they had already done that. And it wasn't until the 12th that they gave the RNA to the world. The United States, under Donald Trump in December, right after Christmas, volunteered to send National Institutes for Health and Centers for Disease Control scientists and researchers to China to help them map this stuff and figure it out, or ask them to send samples so they could do it. Remember, we had no reported case in the United States until late January, so we had no samples of the virus here that we could go after. Now, it turns out we actually have people infected in the country by the beginning of the year, but we didn't know that. So the point is that the Chinese, no one's attacking them, and no one's talking about their unfair trade practices now, or their corrupt practices, their intellectual property theft. There's enough things going around that they don't need to foment insurrection. And actually, it's not in China's advantage for there to be insurrection in the United States. You don't want your people that buy your stuff to be, hiding in their houses, afraid to go shopping, or not buying things because people are burning city streets. So I don't think that the Chinese have done that, and it's not their interest because it really undermines what they want. They want to sell their crap here and prevent our crap from being sold there and amass money so that they can lift 500 million people who remain in poverty in China out of poverty so that the government there is never threatened by its population. That's the Chinese Communist Party's great fear, is that the people will rise up like Tiananmen, but it won't be 10,000 people, it'll be 100 million people. And that scares them to bejesus out of them.
Right. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the live stream in a couple of minutes, guys, but look, there's the painting. I'm shutting down the auction now. I think Clint is the winner with a 5,000 Rand bid. Congratulations, Clint. If you can please just send me a confirmation email, and then I think Marlene has given you the banking details for the charity, where the money's got to go. Once they confirm the money's come in, we will get the painting off to you. Now, I just want to thank Chris so much for coming on the channel tonight. He's obviously a wealth of information, and I've put his YouTube channel link directly below this video, so you can click on that and subscribe to his channel if you'd like to follow his videos. And also, of course, you can subscribe to this channel because we have videos going up every day. Now, in conclusion, Chris, is there something you'd like to say to all those people watching this video now or who might watch it later?
Well, absolutely. Well, thanks. First, Scott, thanks a lot for the opportunity to come on the channel and for the invitation. And also, thank you for reciprocating and coming on my channel this coming Friday evening. I'm looking forward to being able to interview and talk about your experiences in Tanganyika and South Africa and other places. But what I would like to say to folks is this. Our liberty and our freedoms, and when I say our, I'm talking about Homo sapiens. I'm not talking about Americans or South Africans or Botswana. I'm talking about all of us. Our liberty is in jeopardy from totalitarians. And I'm not trying to scare people, but it's a reality. We see it here in my state in Pennsylvania, where governors shut down businesses and had the audacity to call business owners and local officials at the mayoral and the county seat level cowards in the face of an enemy, trying to turn a virus into a war. And what is happening is that we've seen restrictions on our liberty and our freedoms, and it's happening the world over. Those in South Africa know this only too well, what has happened to their freedoms there, and how innocent law-abiding citizens have been criminalized with ridiculous things that aren't even laws in South Africa by the National Coronavirus Command Council. What I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's the time for patriots to be rational, to be calm, not be Karens, not to be, panicking or being the boy who cried wolf, but to be reasoned, cogent thinkers, to talk about what's happening with each other, share that, and when you see something that's wrong, you have to call it out in whatever fashion you can. A friend of mine, Joe Amelia, is an American comic in South Africa. He was attacked by a leftist who jumped in his video stream on YouTube last week and then called him a homophobe and a racist and said all kinds of things about him, and then wrote to a company that he was doing a comedy show for and got him fired from it after claiming he was those things with no evidence. So he's now filed a lawsuit against her in South Africa to overturn this and make this person pay for it. You have to stand up for your rights where you can. It isn't always easy. And anyway, so that's more than one thing. But the theme of that is that you have to watch out for yourself and watch out for others. Whether you're white, you're black, you're colored, you're Indian, you're Asian, you're blue, you're purple, you're from Alpha Centauri, wherever you're from, you've got to stand. You got to stand up for your rights. And that's and for people. Now, one thing I like, not necessarily correct, but add to your comment, Scott, the tag for this one, for the video, it said Chris is an American who's beginning to stand up for South Africa. No, that's not entirely accurate. I have been speaking this about South Africa for a long time. What is different is that I didn't have this voice because as a serving officer, of course, there's certain things that you can't say. You can't be contradicting government. As long as government's giving lawful, moral and lawful orders, you have to follow them. But now I have that voice, and so I'm using it. But I have been talking about the shortcomings of the government in South Africa for many, many years. But to be fair, the level that I'm at now has only been in the last 2 years. After Cyril became the president of South Africa, I've really focused on addressing the shortcomings. And now, with what's going on, it's very sad to see. Anyway, and if I could ask really quick, that's the other one I want to say. Folks, you're welcome to come subscribe to my channel. Come check it out. I'll be doing a live stream, which I'm late for now, as soon as I go off here, and doing a wrap up and talk about some things I didn't get a chance to answer here because time was short. But Scott, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to seeing you on my channel on Friday. God bless.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, just in conclusion, guys, just very quickly, I just want to say thank you to the moderators in the side chat for keeping things on the straight road. And for all those who've actually participated by putting your questions or comments in the side chat, and to Clint, congratulations on winning the painting. And finally, to people who've just been watching the live stream and who might watch it later, thank you for joining us. And I certainly have learnt a lot tonight, and I hope that you guys have. And with that, I'm going to say good night all. Please take care.